Clara Wynne had 60 seconds to decide, marry a monster or die trying to escape him. Her stepfather's signature was still wet on the contract that sold her like livestock to Silas Drummond, a man who'd buried 3 wives already. The bruises on her ribs throbbed as she threw her leg over the dying mare, and the desert stretched before her like an open grave. Behind her, Carson Hollow slept. Ahead, only sand and stars and the slim chance of freedom. She dug her heels in, and the mare lurched forward into the darkness that might kill her but wouldn't own her. Before we ride into Clara's story, I want to invite you to stay until the very end. This is a tale of survival, love, and 2 souls who refuse to be broken. Drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Now, let's begin. The mare collapsed 3 days into the Sonoran Desert. Clara had expected it. The animal had been half dead when she stole her from the livery, ribs showing like piano keys, one eye clouded with age. But a dying horse was better than no horse at all, and Clara had learned young that beggars measured their blessings in heartbeats, not happiness. She stood over the fallen animal, watching its flanks heave in the merciless afternoon sun. The mare's good eye rolled toward her, patient and knowing. Clara uncorked her last canteen and poured a palmful of water, let the horse drink from her cupped hand. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." The mare died quietly, as if apologizing back. Clara pressed her forehead against the animal's neck until the warmth faded, then stood on legs that trembled like new rope. Her lips were cracked and bleeding. Her dress, the only one she owned that wasn't torn, clung to her back with sweat and dust. She'd lost her bonnet the first day when the wind tore it away, and now her face felt tight as dried leather, burned raw by sun she'd never learned to hide from. She had maybe a cup of water left. No food since yesterday's handful of mesquite beans she'd stripped from a dying tree. No shelter except the rocks. No weapon except a kitchen knife tucked in her boot. Behind her, 3 days' worth of footprints and hoof prints carved a path back to Carson Hollow. Back to her stepfather's house with its smell of whiskey and failure. Back to Silas Drummond, waiting like a spider in his ranch house, already planning where her body would rest when he was done with her. Ahead, nothing but waves of heat and endless beige, broken only by the dark shapes of distant mesas that never seemed to get closer no matter how long she walked. Clara Wynne was 19 years old, and she was going to die out here. She almost laughed. Almost. Except her throat was too dry, and her sense of humor had evaporated somewhere around mile 40. She started walking. The sun was lower when she saw the rider. At first she thought it was a mirage, her mind conjuring Jew from desperation and heat stroke. But the shape didn't shimmer or vanish. It grew larger, more solid. A man on a horse, moving at an easy lope across the hardpan, trailing a second horse behind. Clara's hand went to the knife in her boot. Her fingers closed around the handle, slick with sweat. The rider saw her, changed direction, came straight toward her. She stood her ground because she had no strength left for running. The knife felt small and inadequate in her hand, a child's toy against the vast indifference of the desert. But it was sharp, and she'd used it before. On her stepfather, the night he tried to collect an advance on what he'd sold. The scar above his eye was her signature, the reason he'd been so eager to be rid of her. The rider pulled up 20 feet away. The horse, a big bay gelding, well-fed and strong, tossed its head and snorted. Dust plumped around its hooves. The man sat his saddle like he'd been born there, tall, broad-shouldered, with a face carved by weather and hard years. A scar ran from his left temple to his jaw, pale against sun-darkened skin. He wore a dark hat pulled low, a vest over a faded shirt, and gun belt that looked well used. His eyes were gray as storm clouds, and they took her in with a single sweep. The knife, the sunburn, the desperation she couldn't hide. "That's far enough," Clara said. Her voice came out like sandpaper on wood. The man didn't move, didn't speak, just studied her with those gray eyes, patient as stone. "I said that's far enough." "Heard you the first time." His voice was low, rough-edged, like he didn't use it much. "You always greet people trying to help you with a knife?" "I don't need help." His mouth might have twitched. Hard to tell under the shadow of his hat. "That right? You just like walking through the desert with no horse, no water, and skin burned red as a lobster. What I like is none of your business." "Fair enough." He started to turn his horse, Panic flared hot in Clara's chest. Wait. He stopped, looked back at her. Pride warred with survival in her throat. Survival won, barely. I could use some water, if you can spare it. The man swung down from his saddle in one fluid motion. He moved like smoke, quiet and purposeful, and Clara's grip tightened on her knife. But he just pulled a canteen from his saddle, walked forward slow, like approaching a spooked animal, and held it out. Their eyes met. His were careful, measuring. Whatever he saw on her face made him nod, just once, and extend the canteen another inch. Clara took it, forced herself to drink slow even though every cell in her body screamed to gulp. The water was warm and tasted like metal and was the most beautiful thing she'd ever swallowed. When she handed it back, their fingers brushed. His were scarred and calloused, the hands of a man who'd spent his life working with them. Thank you, she managed. You're welcome. He corked the canteen. Now, you want to tell me what a girl's doing out here trying to die? I'm not trying to die. Could have fooled me. He tilted his head toward the buzzards circling overhead. They seemed pretty convinced. Clara felt tears prick her eyes, the first since she'd left Carson Hollow, and hated herself for it. I'm headed west. West is a big place. Anywhere that's not behind me. Something shifted in his expression. Recognition, maybe. Or understanding. Running from something? Someone. He nodded slowly, like that made perfect sense. Like he'd heard that story before. How far you get on foot before the desert takes you? Another day? 2 if you're lucky. Then I'll die free. Free and dead is still dead. Better than alive and owned. The words came out harder than she meant them, sharp with truth that cut both ways. The man's jaw tightened, and for a moment Clara thought she saw something break open behind his eyes, some old wound she'd accidentally pressed. But he shuttered it fast, locked it away. Yeah, he said quietly. I suppose it is. They stood there in the dying light, 2 strangers united by nothing except the understanding that sometimes running was the only choice left. I can get you to Covenant, he said finally. Town about 4 days' ride north. Stage runs through there twice a week. You could catch passage west from there. I don't have money for stage passage. Work your way then. Covenant's always looking for help. Saloon, boarding house, laundry. Honest work if you want it. Clara searched his face for the trap, the angle, the price. Men didn't help women for nothing. She'd learned that lesson early and often. What do you want? Want? For helping me. What's it cost? His expression went flat. Nothing. Nobody does nothing for nothing. Maybe I'm nobody then. He walked back to his horse, gathered the reins. You can come or you can stay. Don't matter to me either way, but if you stay, you're dead by morning. If you come, you got a chance. Your choice. He swung into the saddle, and Clara's heart lurched. He was actually leaving, just like that, offering help and walking away from it in the same breath. Wait! The word tore out of her. I'll come. He looked down at her from his horse, and something in his face gentled. Not much, just enough to make him look almost human. Then let's ride before dark catches us. He reached down. Clara stared at his hand, scarred knuckles, blunt fingers, steady as iron, and made her choice. She gripped his forearm, and he pulled her up behind him in one smooth motion, strong enough that she barely had to jump. The spare horse, a younger mare, less traveled, was loaded with supplies. Name's Rowan, he said. Rowan Cade. Clara wrapped her arms around his waist because there was no saddle horn to grip. Through his shirt she could feel old scars, ridge after ridge of them, a map of violence written on his back. Clara, she said. Clara Wynne. Well, Clara Wynne, you picked one hell of a way to not die. He kicked the horse into a trot, and they rode toward the setting sun with Clara pressed against the back of a stranger who smelled like leather and wood smoke and secrets he'd probably take to his grave. Behind them, the buzzards circled lower, confused by the disappearance of their promised meal. They rode until full dark, then made camp in a shallow arroyo where the rocks gave back the day's heat and hid their fire from horizon watchers. Rowan worked in efficient silence, hobbling the horses, gathering scrub wood, building a fire so small it barely qualified as flame. He moved like a man who'd done this 10,000 times, who could set camp blind and drunk and still have it done right. Clara sat on a flat rock and tried not to shake. Now that the adrenaline was fading, everything hurt. Her legs, her back, her face, which felt like it was still cooking even though the sun was gone. Her hands trembled when she tried to push hair from her face. Rowan noticed. He pulled a tin from his pack and tossed it to her. For the burn. She opened it. Some kind of salve, thick and pale green, smelling like herbs she couldn't name. What is it? Helps. That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting. He pulled out jerky, hardtack, and apple that had seen better days. Set half of it aside for her without asking if she was hungry. Eat slow, your stomach's not used to food right now. Clara wanted to argue just on principle, but her stomach chose that moment to growl loud enough to wake the dead. She picked up the jerky and bit off a piece, chewed it into submission. It tasted like salt and smoke and heaven. They ate in silence. The fire crackled. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote sang its lonely song, and another answered. The stars came out thick as spilled salt, more than Clara had ever seen in her life. Away from towns and lanterns, the sky was different, bigger, older, full of light that had been traveling since before she was born. Thank you, she said quietly, for the food, for everything. Rowan grunted. Might have been acknowledgement, might have been indigestion. Why are you helping me? Already told you. No, you told me you'd get me to Covenant. You didn't tell me why. He poked at the fire with a stick, rearranging coals that didn't need rearranging. For a long moment, Clara thought he wouldn't answer at all. Then, had a sister once, about your age, got into trouble with the wrong man. I wasn't there when she needed help. He kept his eyes on the fire. Maybe helping you balances some of that out. Where is she now? Dead. The word sat heavy between them. Clara opened her mouth to say something. Sorry, maybe, or that's awful, or one of the other useless things people said when someone cracked open their grief. But Rowan cut her off. Don't. It was a long time ago, and sorry doesn't fix anything. Clara nodded. She understood that. Sorry was what her stepfather said between beatings. Sorry was what Silas Drummond had probably said to his first 3 wives before he started using his fists. The man you're running from, Rowan said. He coming after you? Probably. He dangerous? Very. He know how to track? Clara thought about Silas Drummond, cattle baron, landowner, man who collected things and broke them when they didn't perform. He'll hire people who do. Rowan nodded like he'd expected that. Then we need to be smart about this. Tomorrow I'll teach you how to hide your trail, how to read the land, how to spot riders before they spot you. Why would you do that? Because getting you to Covenant alive means you need to stay alive on the way there. He stood, dusted off his hands. Get some sleep. We leave at first light. Where are you going? First watch. Watch for what? He looked at her then, and his eyes were old, too old for his face. Everything. He walked to the edge of their camp and stood there, a dark shape against darker rock. And Clara realized with a chill that Rowan Cade wasn't just helping her out of guilt or kindness. He was a man who knew how to hide, who knew how to watch, who carried scars on his back and secrets in his eyes. He was a man who was running too. Clara woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of horses. She jolted upright, heart hammering, hand going for her knife. But it was just Rowan, saddling the bay in the pre-dawn gray. The fire was dead and scattered, no trace they'd ever been there except disturbed sand. Easy, Rowan said without turning. Just us. Clara stood on shaky legs, every muscle screaming. Yesterday's ride had found places to hurt she didn't know existed. You let me sleep all night. You needed it. You were supposed to wake me for watch. Didn't need you for watch. He cinched the saddle tight. Need you rested. Can't teach you anything if you're half dead from exhaustion. He handed her jerky and hardtack wrapped in cloth, a canteen of water. Clara ate standing, watching him work. He moved with the kind of economy that came from necessity. No wasted motion, no second guessing. Like a man who'd learned that mistakes in the desert were measured in corpses. When the horses were ready and the camp erased, Rowan turned to her. Before we ride, you need to understand something. Clara waited. The desert doesn't care about your story, doesn't care why you're running or what you're running from. It'll kill you just as dead whether you're innocent or guilty, victim or villain. He held her gaze. So if you want to live, you do exactly what I tell you, when I tell you, no questions and no arguments. Understood? Pride bristled in Clara's chest. She'd spent her whole life being told what to do by men who thought ownership and authority were the same thing. But this was different. Rowan wasn't trying to control her. He was trying to keep her alive. Understood, she said. Good. Now watch. For the next hour, as the sun rose and turned the desert from gray to gold to burning white, Rowan taught her the language of survival. He showed her how to walk in rock and hard pan where hooves left no prints, how to scatter sand behind you to erase what couldn't be hidden, how to read the wind and know when dust devils would cover your trail, how to spot water from the way birds circled and plants grew, how to tell the difference between a safe shadow and a predator's waiting place. The desert tells you everything if you know how to listen, he said, kneeling beside a creosote bush. See these branches? Way they're bent? Something big pushed through here recently, horse most likely, headed northeast. How do you know it was recent? Because the branches haven't sprung back yet. Give them another day, and you wouldn't be able to tell. He stood, scanning the horizon. Someone's using this route. We need to find another. They did, picking their way through terrain that looked impossible until Rowan showed her the paths. He talked her through every choice. Why this direction instead of that one? Why they stayed low instead of riding the ridge? Why they doubled back twice to confuse any trail? You're teaching me how to disappear, Clara said. I'm teaching you how to survive. Disappearing is just part of it. By midday, Clara's head was spinning with information. Rowan called a halt in the shadow of a massive boulder, gave her water and dried fruit, let the horses rest. How did you learn all this? She asked. The hard way. He sat with his back to the rock, hat pulled low. Made mistakes, learned from them, made more mistakes. Learned from those too. Are you running from something? His jaw tightened. That's my business. You asked about my business. That's different. Your business might get us both killed if I don't know what's coming. He tilted his head up, and Clara caught the full weight of those gray eyes. Mine's already done its damage. But you're running. Yeah, I'm running. From the law? From something worse than the law. Clara wanted to press, but something in his face stopped her. Some door slamming shut that she knew better than to try to force. She understood about doors like that. Had a few of her own. Tell me about Silas Drummond, Rowan said. Clara's stomach twisted. What do you want to know? Everything. Who he is. What he wants. How far he'll go to get it. She looked away toward the horizon where heat made the air dance and shimmer. He owns half of Crenshaw County. Cattle, land, mines. He's rich enough to buy judges and sheriffs. Mean enough that people cross the street when they see him coming. And he wants you. He wants a wife. I'm just the newest name on his list. The words tasted bitter. My stepfather owed him money, gambling debts. Drummond offered to clear it all if my stepfather signed a contract promising me. Your stepfather agreed. My stepfather would have sold me for a bottle of whiskey and a kind word. Clara's hands curled into fists. He told me it was an honor, that Drummond was respectable, that I should be grateful. Grateful, Rowan repeated, voice flat. I met Drummond once, at a town dance. He looked at me like I was a horse he was thinking about buying. She shuddered at the memory. He told me I had good hips for breeding, said it right there in front of everyone, like it was a compliment. Rowan's expression went dark. His other wives, what happened to them? The first one died in childbirth. The second one fell down the stairs and broke her neck. The third one disappeared completely. Some people say she ran away. Others say he buried her in the hills where nobody would find her. Clara met his eyes. I wasn't going to be number 4. No, Rowan said quietly. You weren't. They sat in silence for a while. Clara picked at the dried apple in her hand, not really eating it. The fear she'd been out running for 3 days sat heavy in her chest, and saying it all out loud made it worse somehow, more real. He'll send people after me, she said. Drummonds don't let things go. His pride's too big and his pockets are too deep. He'll hire trackers, bounty hunters, anyone who can find me. Let him. Clara looked up sharply. What? Let him send his people. By the time they figure out where you went, we'll be in Covenant. And once you're there, you disappear for real. New name, new life. He'll never find you. You really think it's that easy? No, but it's possible, and possible's better than dead. He stood, offered her his hand. Come on, let's get moving. I want to make the canyon before dark. Clara took his hand and let him pull her up. His grip was warm and solid, anchor strong. For just a moment, she let herself imagine what it might be like to have someone like Rowan Cade on her side for more than just a 4-day ride. Someone who didn't want to own her or use her or break her. Someone who saw her as a person instead of property. Then she let go and climbed onto the mare he'd given her to ride, and they headed north toward Covenant and whatever came after. The canyon was a gash in the earth, deep and narrow, with walls that glowed orange in the setting sun. A creek ran through the bottom, barely more than a trickle, but water nonetheless. Real water, not alkali or poison. Rowan led them down a switchback trail that made Clara's heart climb into her throat, but the horses took it easy as walking on flat ground. At the bottom, hidden from anyone above, was a space just big enough for camp. A fire ring made of river stones, log seats worn smooth by use, even a lean-to built from driftwood and canvas. You've been here before, Clara said. Couple times. It's hidden. That's the point. He swung down from his saddle, started unloading. We'll stay here tonight. Tomorrow we'll reach Covenant by afternoon if we push hard. Clara helped with the horses, following the routine Rowan had shown her. She was getting better at it, the unsaddling, the hobbling, the checking for stones and injuries. Her hands still fumbled with knots, but not as badly as yesterday. When the horses were settled and the fire was going, Rowan pulled out his rifle and a cleaning kit. He worked methodically, running patches down the barrel, checking the action, his hands moving with practiced ease. Can you shoot? He asked. No. He looked up. You carry a gun? Just a knife. A knife's not going to help you much if someone's shooting at you from 50 yards. He finished with his rifle, set it aside, and pulled out a revolver. This is a Colt 44, 6 shots, single action. Tomorrow I'll show you how to use it. I don't want to shoot anyone. Neither do I. But wanting and needing are different things. He checked the cylinder, then set the gun on the log between them. The world's full of men who'll hurt you if they think they can get away with it. A gun makes them think twice. Clara stared at the revolver. It looked heavy and mean, all steel and purpose. Have you killed people? Yes. No hesitation, no shame or pride, just flat fact. Clara's breath caught. Does that scare you? Rowan asked. Should it? Probably. Are you going to hurt me? No. How do I know that? You don't. He met her eyes across the fire. You're taking a chance on me same as I'm taking one on you. Difference is, I've got the gun and you've got the trust. All you can do is hope your instincts are right. Clara's instincts had kept her alive this long. They'd told her to run from Drummond, to steal the horse, to take water from a scarred stranger in the desert. So far they'd been right. Tomorrow, she said, you'll teach me to shoot. Tomorrow, I'll teach you to shoot. They settled into evening routine. Rowan made coffee and beans. Clara gathered kindling for morning. The canyon walls held the day's warmth, and the creek sang its small song. And for the first time since leaving Carson Hollow, Clara felt something other than terror and exhaustion. She felt almost safe. After dinner, Rowan pulled out a small leather-bound book and a pencil stub. He wrote in it by firelight, his hand moving slow and careful across the page. What are you writing? Clara asked. Notes, directions, in case something happens to me and you need to find Covenant on your own. Nothing's going to happen to you. He looked up and something flickered in his expression. Almost a smile, but not quite. Hope you're right, but hope's not a plan. He finished writing, tore out the page, and handed it to her. Clara unfolded it and saw a rough map. Landmarks, distances, warnings about bad water and dangerous passages. At the bottom he'd written in careful block letters, show this to Marshal Webb in Covenant. Tell him Rowan sent you. He'll help. Keep that somewhere safe, Rowan said. And if we get separated, you follow that map and don't look back. Understand? We're not going to get separated. Clara. The way he said her name, firm but not harsh, serious but not cruel, made her look at him, really look at him. And she saw it then, the thing he'd been carrying since they met. Guilt, old and deep and permanent as his scars. "I won't fail you," he said quietly, "but if I do, I need to know you'll save yourself." Clara folded the map and tucked it inside her dress, against her heart. "I won't need it." "Good, but you'll keep it anyway." She nodded. They sat in comfortable silence after that, listening to the desert's night music. Clara felt her eyes getting heavy, her body begging for sleep, but she forced herself to stay awake a little longer, to memorize this moment. The fire. The canyon walls. The man across from her who'd risked his own running to help with hers. "Rowan? Yeah? You're the first man I've ever trusted." He went very still. The firelight caught the scar on his face, made it look deeper than it was. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough as sandstone. "Then I'll try my damnedest to be the last one who ever lets you down." Clara fell asleep to that promise, wrapped in a borrowed blanket under more stars than she could count, and dreamed of things other than running. Tomorrow would bring guns and lessons, and one day closer to freedom. Tomorrow would bring choices that would change everything. But tonight, in a hidden canyon with a man who'd chosen to help her, Clara Wynne was alive and safe and hopeful. And that was enough. The morning came cold and clear, turning the canyon walls from black to purple to burnt orange as the sun climbed. Clara woke to find Rowan already up, the fire rebuilt, coffee boiling in a battered tin pot. He moved quiet as a ghost, and she wondered how long he'd been awake, keeping watch while she slept. "Morning," he said without turning. "Coffee's ready." Clara sat up, every muscle protesting. 2 days of riding after years of walking had introduced her to whole new categories of pain. She accepted the cup he handed her, wrapped her cold fingers around the metal, and drank. The coffee was strong enough to strip paint and tasted like the best thing she'd ever swallowed. "How do you feel?" Rowan asked. "Like I got kicked by a mule." "That'll pass. Give it a few more days and your body will remember how to ride." He handed her jerky and hardtack. "Eat up. We've got work to do before we leave." After breakfast, Rowan led her to a flat section of canyon floor where the sand was packed hard. He pulled out the revolver he'd shown her last night and a small box of ammunition. "This is a Colt single-action Army," he said, holding it up. "Weighs about 2.5 pounds loaded, 6 rounds in the cylinder. You cock the hammer with your thumb, aim, and squeeze the trigger. Don't pull, squeeze. Pulling jerks the barrel and throws off your shot." Clara took the gun when he offered it. The weight surprised her, solid and purposeful. The metal was cool against her palm. "It's heavy." "It's supposed to be. A gun that's too light kicks like hell, and you can't control it." He moved behind her, adjusted her grip. His hands were warm and calloused, patient as he positioned her fingers. "Thumb on the hammer, finger outside the trigger guard until you're ready to fire. Never point it at anything you don't intend to shoot." He stepped back, and Clara felt suddenly alone with the weapon in her hand. "See that rock?" Rowan pointed to a pale stone about 20 feet away. "That's your target. When you're ready, cock the hammer, aim, and fire." Clara's heart hammered against her ribs. She'd seen guns before, heard them fired in town on rowdy Saturday nights. But holding one, feeling its potential violence in her hand, was different. This was choosing to have power, choosing to be dangerous. She thumbed back the hammer. The click was loud in the quiet canyon. She raised the gun, sighted down the barrel the way she'd seen men do, and squeezed the trigger. The recoil nearly knocked her backward. The sound was enormous, echoing off the canyon walls like thunder. Her shot went wide, kicking up sand 3 feet to the left of the rock. "Again," Rowan said. Clara cocked and fired. Wide right this time. "You're flinching, anticipating the recoil." He moved beside her again, one hand steadying her shoulder. "The gun's going to kick no matter what. Accept it. Don't fight it. Breathe out as you squeeze." She tried again, closer this time, but still a miss. "Better. Again." They spent an hour in the canyon bottom, Clara firing until her ears rang and her hands ached from the recoil. Rowan fed her bullets and instructions in equal measure, never impatient, never condescending, just steady as stone, correcting her form, praising her progress. On her 23rd shot, she hit the rock. "There, Rowan said, and she heard satisfaction in his voice. Now do it again. She did. Not every time, her accuracy was still terrible, maybe 1 hit in 4, but enough to prove it wasn't luck. By the time they finished, Clara's arms trembled with fatigue and 6 rounds remained in the ammunition box. Keep these, Rowan said, handing her the box and the revolver. Gun's yours now. Practice every chance you get. A weapon you can't use is worse than no weapon at all. Clara stared at the revolver in her hand. It felt different now, less foreign. Still heavy, still dangerous, but hers. Her choice to carry. Her responsibility to use well or not at all. Thank you, she said. Don't thank me yet. Hitting a rock and hitting a man are different things. His expression went dark. And once you've shot someone, you can't unsee it, can't unfeel it. That weight stays with you forever. Have you shot a lot of people? Enough to know I never want to shoot anyone again. He started gathering up the spent shell casings, pocketing them out of habit. But wanting and reality are different things out here. They broke camp quickly after that, erasing all signs they'd been there. Claire was getting better at the routine, anticipating what needed to be done before Rowan asked. She rolled blankets tight, scattered the fire, helped load the horses. The work felt good, purposeful, like she was earning her place instead of being carried as dead weight. They climbed out of the canyon as the sun hit its peak, and the desert opened before them again, vast and merciless and beautiful in its own harsh way. But Clara saw it differently now. Not just as emptiness trying to kill her, but as a thing with rules and patterns, dangers and havens. Rowan had taught her to read it, and that reading had transformed terror into something closer to respect. They rode north through country that got progressively greener, the hard desert giving way to scrubland dotted with juniper and pinon. The air smelled different here, less like dust and more like sage. They passed a homestead around midday, abandoned, the roof caved in, the well dry. Rowan circled it twice, reading the ground for signs of recent visitors, before declaring it safe enough for a brief rest. Clara swung down from her mare, legs wobbling. What happened here? Apache, maybe. Or drought. Or the man who built it just gave up. Rowan checked the well, found nothing but rocks and dead air. The desert takes back what people can't hold. They rested in the shade of the ruined house, sharing water and dried meat. Clara studied the remains, shattered pottery, a rusted skillet, a child's wooden toy half buried in sand. People had lived here once, had dreams here. Those dreams were dust now. Do you think I can really start over in Covenant? She asked. Rowan looked at her for a long moment. Depends on what you mean by start over. You can change your name, change your work, change your circumstances. But you can't change what happened to you, can't erase it. That comes with you whether you want it or not. Sounds like you're speaking from experience. Everything I say is from experience. He stood, scanned the horizon. But yeah, you can build something new. Just don't expect to do it without the past trying to catch up. Your past, Clara said. Is it still chasing you? His jaw tightened. Every day. Are you going to tell me what you did? No. Why not? Because knowing makes you complicit, and if there's one thing I can do right, it's keeping you clear of my sins. He walked to his horse, gathered the reins. Let's move. I want to make Covenant before dark. They rode hard after that, pushing the horses to a steady lope across terrain that flattened and opened. Clara's thighs screamed from gripping the saddle, but she didn't complain. Complaining was for people who had the luxury of choice. She'd chosen this when she took Rowan's hand in the desert, and she'd see it through. The sun was sliding toward the horizon when Rowan pulled up short. What is it? Clara asked. He didn't answer, just sat his horse, still as a statue, staring at something in the distance. Clara followed his gaze and saw it, a thin line of dust rising into the sky, riders moving fast. How many? She whispered. 3, maybe 4. His hand went to his rifle. Could be nothing. Could be everything. Could be Drummond's men. Could be. Clara's blood went cold. 3 days. She'd had 3 days of freedom, and now it might end here in the scrubland with Covenant just hours away. Her hand found the revolver at her hip, and the weight of it was suddenly inadequate. 6 bullets against 4 men who knew how to kill. What do we do? Rowan's eyes swept the landscape, calculating angles and distances. There. He pointed to a cluster of rocks half a mile east. We can ford up there if they're hunting us. Better than being caught in the open. And if they're not hunting us, then we wasted time being careful, which is better than being dead from being stupid. He kicked his horse into a gallop, and Clara followed, the mare responding to her urgency. They reached the rocks and dismounted, leading the horses into a natural hollow where they'd be hidden from casual view. Rowan pulled his rifle and a box of cartridges, positioned himself behind a boulder that gave him a clear sight line. Clara crouched beside him, revolver in hand, watching the dust cloud grow closer. 4 riders, Rowan confirmed, voice low, moving with purpose. They're tracking something. Us? Maybe. Or maybe they're just travelers in a hurry. He worked the lever on his rifle, chambering around. We'll know soon enough. The riders came into view, 4 men on good horses, dressed for hard travel. They moved in a loose formation, the lead rider scanning the ground while the others watched the horizon. Hunters, Clara thought. Or worse. They were a quarter-mile away when the lead rider stopped. He dismounted, knelt, studied something on the ground. The other 3 pulled up beside him, hands resting easy on their gun belts. They found our trail, Rowan said quietly. Clara's heart climbed into her throat. What do we do? Stay quiet. Stay low. Let me do the talking if it comes to that. He sighted down his rifle, tracking the lead rider. And if shooting starts, you empty that revolver into anything that moves, then reload fast as you can. The riders conferred for a moment, the lead one pointing north, toward Covenant. Then one of them turned, looked directly at the rocks where Clara and Rowan hid. Even from this distance, Clara could feel his gaze like a physical touch, searching. They know we're here, she breathed. Maybe. Maybe they're just being thorough. Rowan's voice was steady, but Clara saw the tension in his shoulders. Either way, this is about to get interesting. The riders mounted again, but instead of continuing north, they turned toward the rocks. All 4 of them, spreading out in a line, moving slow and careful. The posture of men who expected trouble and were ready for it. Rowan Cade! The shout came from the lead rider, a big man with a black beard and a voice like gravel. We know you're in those rocks. Come out and we can talk this through, peaceful. Rowan's finger moved to his trigger. You know these men? Never seen them before in my life. Then how do they know your name? Good question. The riders kept coming, now just 200 yards away. Clara could see their faces. Hard men, weathered and dangerous, with eyes that had seen violence and dealt it back. The kind of men who did wet work for whoever paid best. Cade, the bearded man called again. Magnus Veron wants a word. Says he's got a proposition for you. Every muscle in Rowan's body went rigid. Clara felt it like a shockwave, the way his whole being reacted to that name. Who's Magnus Veron? She whispered. The devil in human skin. Rowan's voice was flat, dead. And the reason I've been running for 2 years. We don't want the girl, another rider, younger, with a scar across his throat. Just you, Cade. Hand yourself over and she can ride on to Covenant untouched. Don't believe that for a second, Rowan said, more to himself than Clara. Veron's men don't leave witnesses. What does he want from you? Revenge. Justice. Depends on how you look at it. Rowan shifted his aim, tracking from rider to rider. I killed his brother. Clara's breath caught. Why? Because his brother needed killing. No hesitation, no regret, just fact. And because I was too late to save my sister from what he'd done to her. Understanding crashed over Clara like cold water, the scars on Rowan's back, the guilt in his eyes, the way he moved through the world like a man expecting death around every corner. He wasn't just running from justice. He was running from a man powerful enough to buy it. Last chance, Cade. The bearded man was 100 yards away now, close enough that Clara could see the notches carved into his gun belt. Veron's offering amnesty. Come work for him and your past gets buried. Refuse and we bury you. They're lying, Clara said to him. Of course they're lying. Rowan took a breath, let it out slow. But we can't fight 4 men and win. Not here. Not with you still learning which end of a gun to point. So what do we do? He looked at her then, and Clara saw something in his face she hadn't seen before. Not fear exactly, but calculation. The look of a man weighing his life against someone else's and making hard choices. I'm going to walk out there and talk. Keep them focused on me. When I give you the signal, you mount up and ride north fast as your horse can carry you. Don't look back. Don't stop. Just get to Covenant and find Marshal Webb. I'm not leaving you. You don't have a choice. The hell I don't. Clara gripped her revolver tighter. You said you wouldn't fail me. Walking out there to die isn't keeping that promise. And letting you die because I was too proud to negotiate isn't keeping it either. His voice softened. Clara, listen to me. Baron wants me, not you. If I surrender, they might let you go. Might. That's better odds than 4 against 2. And if they don't let me go? If they kill us both? Then at least I tried. He touched her face just once, his scarred fingers gentle against her sunburned cheek. You asked me once if you could trust me. This is trust. Letting me save you the only way I know how. Tears burned Clara's eyes. This isn't fair. Nothing about this world is fair, but I can make this one thing right. He stood, rifle in hand, and stepped out from behind the rocks. The effect was immediate. All 4 riders pulled their weapons, but the bearded man raised a hand. Smart choice, Cade. I'm coming down, Rowan called back. But the girl rides out first. You let her go, and I'll come peaceful. The riders exchanged glances. The bearded man nodded. Fair enough. Girl can go. We got no quarrel with her. Rowan turned back to Clara. Ride. Now. Rowan? Now, Clara. She wanted to argue. Wanted to shoot all 4 men herself and damn the consequences. But she saw the look in his eyes, the set of his jaw, and knew he'd made his choice. Maybe he'd made it the moment he pulled her onto his horse in the desert. Maybe he'd been making it all his life, ever since his sister died and left him with nothing but guilt and rage. You're the first man I've ever trusted, she said, voice breaking. Then trust me now. He smiled, small and sad. And when you're safe, live. Live loud and free and happy. That's how you honor this. Not by dying beside me. Clara mounted her mare with shaking hands. She wanted to say something profound, something that would matter. But all that came out was, don't die. I'll do my best. She kicked the horse into a gallop, riding out of the rocks toward the north, toward Covenant and safety and a life she'd never have if Rowan Cade didn't buy it with his own. The riders watched her pass, hands on their guns but not drawing. The bearded man nodded as she went by, almost respectful. Smart girl, he said. Clara didn't answer, just rode, tears streaming down her face, hating herself for leaving but knowing Rowan was right. One of them had to survive. One of them had to make it matter. She was 200 yards away when she heard the gunshot. It came from the rocks, not from the riders, but from where she'd left Rowan. A single crack that echoed across the scrubland, followed by shouting and return fire. Clara pulled up hard, her mare dancing sideways, and turned to look back. Rowan hadn't surrendered. He'd never intended to. He'd sent her away and then started the fight he knew he couldn't win, buying her time with bullets and blood. 3 riders were still mounted, firing at the rocks. The 4th lay motionless on the ground, his horse running free. Rowan's first shot had counted. Clara's hands moved before her mind caught up. She turned the mare, dug in her heels, and rode back toward the fight. What are you doing? She screamed at herself. He died to save you. Don't waste it. But her hands wouldn't turn the horse. Her body wouldn't run. Because somewhere between the desert and the canyon and this moment, something had changed. Rowan Cade wasn't just the man who'd saved her. He was the man who'd taught her to survive, to fight, to choose her own death instead of accepting the one dealt to her. And Clara Wynne was done running from men who thought her life was worth less than theirs. She rode to higher ground east of the rocks, where she could see the fight, but stay out of easy range. The 3 remaining riders had dismounted, using their horses for cover while they poured fire into Rowan's position. She could see him moving between boulders, firing and relocating, making them work for every inch. But he was 1 man against 3, and they were spreading out to flank him. Clara dismounted, pulled her revolver, and took a position behind a fallen log. 300 yards, maybe more. Too far for a pistol, too far for her limited skill. But Rowan had taught her to make every shot count, and right now counting was all that mattered. She cocked the hammer, sighted on the nearest rider, and fired. The shot went wide, kicking up dirt 10 feet from her target, but it had the desired effect. All three men spun toward the new threat, and in that moment of distraction, Rowan dropped another one. The man fell without a sound, his rifle clattering on stone. "Clara!" Rowan's shout carried across the distance. "Get out of here!" She fired again. Closer this time, close enough to make the bearded man dive for cover. Two men left now, and they were caught between two fires. The bearded man barked orders and they split up, one charging Rowan's position while the other turned toward Clara. She saw him bring his rifle up, saw the barrel swing toward her, and knew with crystal clarity that she was about to die. She fired her remaining 4 shots as fast as she could cock the hammer. The first 3 missed. The fourth caught the charging man in the shoulder and spun him sideways. Not a killing shot, but enough to stop his advance. Then her gun clicked empty, and she had 6 bullets in her pocket and shaking hands that dropped 3 of them trying to reload. The wounded man was on his feet again, bringing his rifle back up. Clara fumbled the cylinder open, dumped the spent shells, tried to feed in fresh rounds. Her hands wouldn't cooperate, kept dropping bullets, and the man was aiming and she was going to die, and Rowan's rifle cracked twice. The wounded man fell and didn't rise. That left only the bearded leader, and he'd had enough. He ran for his horse, mounted in one fluid motion, and rode hard to the east. Rowan fired after him, but the range was too long and the rider too fast. Within moments he was gone, leaving only dust and 3 dead men behind. Silence settled over the scrubland like a blanket. Clara stood on shaking legs, her empty revolver dangling from one hand. She'd killed a man, shot him, and watched him fall and felt nothing except the desperate need to keep Rowan alive. The weight of it would come later. Right now she just needed to breathe. Rowan emerged from the rocks, rifle lowered, and looked at her across the distance. His face was unreadable, caught between fury and something else. Something that looked almost like pride. "I told you to run," he said when she rode back to him. "I don't take orders well." "I noticed." He checked the bodies methodically, making sure they were dead, collecting their weapons and ammunition. "You could have been killed. So could you. I was trying to save your life. And I was trying to save yours." Clara climbed down from her mare, legs weak as water. "Seems like we're both terrible at letting the other one die." Rowan looked at her then, really looked at her, and something shifted in his expression. The walls came down just for a moment, and Clara saw the truth written plain on his face. This wasn't about guilt anymore, or his sister, or paying off some cosmic debt. This was about her, about them, about 2 people who'd found something worth fighting for in the middle of nowhere. "You shot a man," he said quietly. "Yes. How do you feel?" "I don't know yet." She looked down at the revolver in her hand, still uncocked, still empty. "Ask me tomorrow." "Fair enough." He gathered the reins of the dead men's horses, 3 good animals that hadn't asked to be part of violence. "We need to move. That one who got away will report back to Varen. He'll know I'm alive, and you're with me. So we're both running now." "Looks that way." He turned to her, and the ghost of a smile touched his scarred face. "Still want to go to Covenant?" Clara thought about it. Thought about the town waiting ahead, the new life she'd been promised, the fresh start that seemed less certain now. Thought about the man beside her who'd tried to die for her and was now stuck living with her instead. "Yes," she said, "but not alone." "You were never going alone." He mounted his horse, gathered the leads for the captured animals. "Come on, we've got ground to cover and a whole lot of questions to answer when we get there." They rode north as the sun bled red into the horizon, leaving 3 bodies for the buzzards and 1 survivor to carry tales of what happened when Magnus Veron's men tried to claim what wasn't theirs. Covenant lay ahead, a day's ride and a world away. And for the first time since leaving Carson Hollow, Clara Wynne wasn't running toward safety. She was riding toward something better. She was riding toward choice. They rode through the night, pushing the horses harder than was wise, but having no choice. The man who'd escaped would reach Magnus Veron by morning, and Varen's response would be swift and merciless. Rowan set a punishing pace, stopping only to water the horses and check their back trail for pursuit that hadn't come yet but would. Clara rode in silence, her mind replaying the fight over and over. The weight of the gun in her hand, the man falling, the terrible understanding that she'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. She'd taken a life to save another, and the arithmetic of that exchange was something she'd be calculating for years to come. "You're quiet," Rowan said as they paused to rest the horses near a dry wash. "Thinking. About the man you shot?" "About all of it." Clara looked at him across the darkness. "You knew they'd never let me go. You knew it was a trap." "I knew." "So why send me away?" "Because there was a chance I was wrong. Small chance, but a chance. And if I could buy you freedom with my life, that was a trade worth making." He checked his rifle, reloading methodically. "Didn't expect you to ride back into it. You should have." "Yeah, I'm learning that about you." There was something in his voice, not quite approval, not quite exasperation, but somewhere in between. "You don't do what you're told." "I do what's right. They're not always the same thing." "No," Rowan agreed. "They're not." They mounted again and continued north. The stars wheeled overhead, cold and distant and uncaring. Clara thought about Carson Hollow, about her stepfather, probably drunk by now, about Silas Drummond waiting for a bride who would never arrive. That life felt like something that had happened to someone else, a story she'd heard rather than lived. The girl who'd fled in the night was dead. The woman riding through the darkness with a gun on her hip and blood on her conscience was someone new. Dawn broke gray and cold, painting the scrubland in shades of steel and ash. Covenant appeared on the horizon like a promise, a collection of buildings huddled together against the emptiness, smoke rising from chimneys, the cross of a church steeple catching the first light. "There," Rowan said, and Clara heard relief in his voice. They reached the town's edge as people were starting their day. A man in a smith's apron stared as they passed, taking in their dust-covered clothes, the extra horses, the hard-used look of people who'd ridden through hell. A woman sweeping her porch stopped mid-stroke, her eyes widening at the rifles and revolvers they carried openly. Rowan led them straight to a building with a faded sign that read Marshall, and dismounted in front of it. Clara followed, her legs nearly buckling when her feet hit solid ground. 3 days of riding and 1 night of running had burned through every reserve she had. The marshal's office was small and neat, with wanted posters tacked to one wall and a gun rack holding rifles on another. Behind a scarred wooden desk sat a man in his 50s, gray-haired and granite-faced, with eyes that had seen too much and remembered all of it. He looked up as they entered, and his expression went from mild interest to sharp attention in the space of a heartbeat. "Rowan Cade," he said. Not a question, a statement of fact. "Marshall Webb." Rowan removed his hat. "We need to talk." "I'd say so." Webb's gaze shifted to Clara, assessing her with the same careful attention. "Who's the girl?" "Clara Wynne. She's with me." "That much I figured. What I'm asking is why." Rowan told the story in clean, efficient sentences. Clara running from Silas Drummond, their meeting in the desert, the attack by Varen's men, the 3 bodies they'd left in the scrubland and the 1 survivor who'd escaped. Webb listened without interrupting, his face giving nothing away, his fingers steepled under his chin. When Rowan finished, Webb was silent for a long moment. Then he stood, walked to a cabinet, and pulled out a bottle and 3 glasses. He poured amber liquid into each and pushed 2 across the desk. "Drink," he said. "You both look like you need it." Clara had never tasted whiskey before. It burned going down and settled in her stomach like liquid fire, but it cut through the exhaustion and fear like a knife through cobwebs. She drank it all and tried not to cough. Webb studied them both over his glass. "Magnus Varon. That's a name I hoped I'd never hear in Covenant." "He knows I'm alive," Rowan said, "and he knows I'm here. Or he will, once his man reports back. Which means he'll be coming. Varon doesn't let debts go unpaid, and you killed his brother. That's a debt written in blood." Webb refilled his glass, but not theirs. "You want to tell me why you killed Thomas Varon?" "Because he raped and murdered my sister. Because the law wouldn't touch him because his brother owned the law. Because killing him was the only justice she'd ever get." Rowan's voice was flat, stripped of emotion. "I'd do it again tomorrow." "And now you've brought that war to my town." "No, I brought a woman who needs help. The war was already coming. I just happened to arrive first." Webb turned his attention to Clara. "Silas Drummond. I know that name too. Cattle Baron out of Crenshaw County. Mean as a rattlesnake and twice as venomous. He bought me from my stepfather, Clara said, meeting his eyes. Contract and signature, legal as land deed. I ran rather than be his property. Smart girl. Drummond's wives have a way of dying young. Webb drummed his fingers on the desk. But running from a legal contract puts you on shaky ground. Drummond could claim your stolen property. Make a case for your return. Let him try. The words came out harder than Clara intended. I'm not property. I'm not going back. I'm not saying you should. I'm saying we need to be smart about this. Webb looked between them, calculating. You're both running from powerful men with money and influence and no shortage of hired guns. If they decide to make a stand here, Covenant becomes a battlefield. Then we'll leave, Rowan said. We didn't come here to bring you trouble. Too late for that. Trouble's already here, sitting in my office drinking my whiskey. Webb smiled, thin and humorless. But I didn't become marshal by running from hard choices. You want sanctuary? You've got it. But you're going to help defend this town if Varen comes calling. We will, Clara said before Rowan could answer. Whatever you need. Webb studied her for a long moment, and something in his expression softened. How old are you, girl? 19? And you've already shot a man? Yes, sir. How's that sitting with you? Clara thought about lying, about saying it didn't bother her, that she was fine, but Webb had the kind of eyes that could spot a lie at 50 paces, and she was too tired to maintain false faces. Like I swallowed broken glass, she said, but I'd do it again to keep Rowan alive. That's honest, at least. Webb stood, walked to his wall of wanted posters, and pulled one down. It showed a younger Rowan, clean-shaven and unscarred, with the words "Wanted for Murder" printed below his picture. There's a $1,000 bounty on your head, Cade, posted by Magnus Varon himself. Says you're armed and dangerous and to be taken dead or alive, with preference for dead. I know. But it's not a legal warrant. Just Varon's money, Varon's vendetta, which means as long as you're in my jurisdiction, I don't have to honor it. He tore the poster in half and dropped it in the trash. Far as I'm concerned, you killed Thomas Varon in defense of your family. That's not murder. That's justice delayed. Rowan's shoulders relaxed infinitesimally. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Varon will come, and when he does, it won't be clean or easy. He'll bring 20 men, maybe more. He'll burn this town to ash if that's what it takes to get to you. Webb sat back down, suddenly looking every one of his 50-odd years. You sure you want to make that stand here? You could still run. Head west to California, lose yourselves in San Francisco or Sacramento. I'm done running, Rowan said. So am I, Clara added. Webb looked at them both, and Clara saw understanding dawn in his eyes. He saw what they hadn't quite admitted to themselves yet, that they weren't just traveling companions or allies of convenience. They were something more, something forged in desert heat and gunfire, something neither of them had names for yet. All right then, Webb said. Let's get you settled. There's a boarding house 2 streets over, run by a widow named Sarah Pritchard. She's got rooms and asks few questions. Get cleaned up, get some sleep. Come back this evening and we'll talk strategy. They stood to leave, but Webb's voice stopped them at the door. Cade, one more thing. Rowan turned back. You did right saving this girl. Your sister would be proud. Something cracked in Rowan's carefully maintained armor. Just for a second, Clara saw the grief underneath, raw and unhealed. Then he nodded once and walked out, and Clara followed him into the morning sun of Covenant, New Mexico territory, the town that might be their salvation or their grave. The boarding house was a 2-story structure with peeling paint and a garden gone to weeds, but it was clean, and the woman who answered their knock had kind eyes. Sarah Pritchard was maybe 40, with gray streaking her dark hair and flour on her apron from morning baking. Marshal Webb sent you? She asked, taking in their appearance with a glance that missed nothing. Yes, ma'am, Rowan said. We need 2 rooms if you've got them. Sarah's eyes flickered between them, and Clara saw the assumption forming. 2 travel-stained strangers, young woman and older man, asking for separate rooms. The conclusion was obvious and wrong, but Clara was too tired to care what this woman thought. I've got 2 rooms on the 2nd floor, Sarah said. $1 a night each, includes breakfast and supper, bathwater's extra. We'll take both, Rowan said, counting out coins. And the bathwater. Sarah pocketed the money and showed them upstairs. The rooms were small but clean, with real beds and windows that looked out over the street. Clara's room had a washstand with a pitcher and basin, a chest of drawers, and a chair that had seen better decades. It was the finest accommodation she'd ever had. I'll heat water for baths, Sarah said. Give me an hour. In the meantime, there's bread and jam in the kitchen if you're hungry. When she left, Clara sat on the bed and felt the last of her strength drain away. The mattress was soft, the room was safe, and for the first time in 6 days she could close her eyes without fear of waking to violence. But sleep felt impossible. Her mind was too full, her body too wound up despite its exhaustion. A knock on her door. Clara, you all right? She opened it to find Rowan standing in the hallway, hat in hand, looking uncertain in a way she'd never seen him look before. I'm fine, she said. Just tired. Yeah, me too. He shifted his weight. Listen, about what happened back there. With Varen's men. You saved my life. You saved mine first. In the desert. That's different. Why? Because you're the man and I'm the woman? Because you're supposed to do the saving. Clara heard the edge in her voice and couldn't smooth it away. I'm not helpless, Rowan. I proved that. I know. That's not what I meant. He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. I'm not used to people coming back for me. Most folks are smart enough to run the other direction. Then most folks are cowards. Or survivors. Same thing sometimes. Clara leaned against the door frame, suddenly aware of how close they were standing. She could see the stubble on his jaw, the way his scar caught the light, the exhaustion written in every line of his face. You told me once you wouldn't fail me. Turns out, I'm not planning to fail you either. Something shifted in his expression. The careful distance he'd maintained since they met cracked, just a fraction, and Clara saw what was underneath. Not just guilt or duty or the need to atone, something warmer, something that made her breath catch. Clara, I know, she said, cutting him off before he could say words that would change everything. Not yet. We're both too tired and too scared, and too many people are trying to kill us. But later, when this is over, we'll figure out what this is. And if we don't survive, then it won't matter anyway. She managed a smile that felt fragile as glass. Get some sleep, Rowan. We're going to need it. He nodded and walked back to his own room, and Clara closed her door and pressed her forehead against the wood. Her heart was hammering, her hands shaking, and she couldn't tell if it was fear or something else entirely. Something that felt dangerous in a different way than guns and violence. Something that felt like hope. The bath, when it came, was heaven. Clara scrubbed away days of desert dust and dried sweat and blood that wasn't hers. She washed her hair 3 times and watched the water turn brown, then gray, then finally clear. When she climbed out, her skin was pink and raw but clean, and she felt almost human again. Sarah had left a dress on the bed, faded calico, mended in places, but clean and whole. A note pinned to it read, "For the girl who needs a fresh start, no charge. Consider it a gift from one woman to another." Clara felt tears prick her eyes as she pulled it on. The dress fit well enough, and more importantly, it wasn't torn or stained or marked by the men who'd thought they owned her. She slept then, deep and dreamless, and woke to evening light slanting through her window and the smell of cooking food drifting up from below. Her stomach growled, reminding her that she'd barely eaten in days. She splashed water on her face, tied back her hair, and went downstairs. The dining room held a long table set for 6. Sarah was ladling stew into bowls while an older man and 2 younger women, one pregnant, one barely out of girlhood, took their seats. Rowan was already there, freshly shaved and wearing a clean shirt, looking more human than Clara had yet seen him. He stood when she entered. "You look better," he said. "So do you." She took the seat beside him, suddenly shy in front of strangers, in this domestic scene that felt foreign as a different country. Dinner was simple but abundant: venison stew, fresh bread, butter, and coffee strong enough to strip paint. The conversation flowed around her, Sarah's brother asking about cattle prices, the pregnant woman complaining about her swollen feet, The young girl talking about a dance next week. Normal people living normal lives, untouched by violence and running, and men like Magnus Veron who thought the world was theirs to burn. Clara ate in silence, listening, and felt the gap between her life and theirs like a physical ache. They belonged here. She was just passing through, dragging death and danger behind her like a shadow. After dinner, she and Rowan walked back to the marshal's office. Covenant was settling into evening, lamps being lit in windows, people calling goodnight to neighbors. It was peaceful in a way Clara had never experienced, and she understood why Rowan had chosen this place as a destination. It was worth protecting, worth fighting for. Webb was waiting with a pot of coffee and a map spread across his desk. 2 other men were with him, one young and rangy with a deputy's star, the other older and prosperous-looking in a suit. Clara Wynne, Rowan Cade, meet Deputy Tom Hollis and Mayor Ethan Price, Webb said. We've been discussing our situation. Our situation? Rowan echoed. Once Veron knows you're here, Covenant becomes a target. We need to be prepared. Webb pointed to the map, which showed the town and surrounding territory. Veron's ranch is 2 days' ride southeast. If he mobilizes his men, we'll have maybe 3 days before they arrive. He'll bring 20 men minimum, Rowan said. All experienced fighters. All loyal to him because he pays better than honest work. We've got 12 men in town who can shoot, Hollis said. He was maybe 25 with eager eyes and no scars, plus the marshal and me. 14 against 20, the mayor said. He was sweating despite the cool evening, mopping his brow with a handkerchief. Those aren't good odds. They're the odds we have, Webb replied. We can ford up, use the buildings for cover, make them pay for every inch. Or we could give them what they want, the mayor said, not looking at Rowan. One man's life against the whole town. That's not a hard calculation. Clara felt rage flare hot in her chest. You'd hand him over after everything he's done? I'd save innocent lives, young lady. That's my job as mayor. Your job is to protect your citizens, all of them, including the ones who came here seeking sanctuary. Clara stood, hands flat on the desk. If you give Rowan to Veron, you're no better than the men chasing us. Mind your tongue, girl. You don't understand the stakes. I understand perfectly. You're scared. Well, so am I. But I'm not letting fear turn me into a coward. That's enough, Webb said, his voice cutting through the tension. Nobody's handing anyone over. Cade and Miss Wynne are under my protection, and that's the end of it. Even if it means war? The mayor asked. Even then. The mayor stood, his face red. The town council will hear about this. Don't be surprised if they overrule you. They can try. Webb's expression was granite. But I'm the law here, not the council. And the law says sanctuary means sanctuary. The mayor stormed out, leaving silence in his wake. Hollis looked embarrassed, caught between loyalty to Webb and understanding the mayor's position. He's scared, the deputy said finally. We all are. Fear's natural, Rowan said. What matters is what you do with it. You let it rule you or you rule it. Easy to say when you're the one being hunted. Deputy, I've been hunted for 2 years. I'm still here. Fear's my oldest companion, and I've learned to make it work for me instead of against me. Rowan leaned over the map. Veron will come at dawn or dusk. When light's tricky, he'll try to pin us down in the town center, use fire to flush us out. We need to control the approaches, set up overlapping fields of fire. They spent the next 2 hours planning. Where to position shooters, which buildings to fortify, how to evacuate civilians who couldn't fight. Clara listened and learned, adding her own observations when they made sense. She'd lived with violence all her life, maybe not the shooting kind, but the threat of it, the shadow of it. She understood how men like Drummond and Veron thought. They believed in overwhelming force and total control. Anything less was weakness. We need to be smarter than them, she said. Not stronger, smarter. The girl's right, Webb said. Veron's used to winning through money and fear. We take those away. We take away his advantage. They talked until midnight, refining plans, identifying weaknesses, building contingencies. When they finally left the marshal's office, Clara's head was spinning with tactics and angles and the cold mathematics of violence. Rowan walked her back to the boarding house through streets gone dark and silent. Their footsteps echoed on the wooden sidewalk, lonely in the quiet. You didn't have to stay, he said. You could have kept riding when we got here, started fresh somewhere Varen's never heard of. I know. So why didn't you? Clara stopped walking and turned to face him. The moon was up, painting everything silver and shadow, and Rowan's scarred face looked carved from stone. But his eyes were alive, questioning, almost vulnerable. Because running alone is just slow dying, she said, and I'm tired of dying slowly. I'd rather live dangerously with someone who sees me as human than survive safely as someone's property. She reached out, touched his hand. You're the first man who ever treated me like I mattered, like my choices were my own. I'm not walking away from that. His fingers closed around hers, warm and calloused and steady. This isn't going to end well, Clara. Odds are we both die in the next week. Maybe. Or maybe we win. Maybe we build something here that's worth having. She squeezed his hand. Either way, I'm not sorry. You should be. I'm a hunted man with a price on his head and more blood on his hands than I can wash off. And I'm a runaway bride with a murder to my name and no future except what I take for myself. Seems like we're well matched. He smiled then, small but genuine, and Clara felt something warm bloom in her chest. Hope, maybe. Or something even more dangerous. Get some sleep, he said. Tomorrow we start preparing. And if Varen comes... When Varen comes, Clara corrected. When he comes, I need you to promise me something. What? If I fall, you run. You take a horse and you ride until Covenant's nothing but dust on the horizon. You don't look back, don't mourn, don't waste my sacrifice. You just live. Rowan, promise me. Clara looked at him for a long moment, at this man who'd saved her and taught her and was now asking her to abandon him if death came calling. Every fiber of her being wanted to refuse, to swear she'd stand beside him until the end, but she saw the need in his eyes, the desperate requirement that she survive even if he didn't. I promise, she lied. He knew she was lying. She could see it in his face, the resignation that said he'd asked anyway because he needed to hear the words, even if they were false. He touched her face, just once, his thumb brushing her cheek. Thank you, he said. Then he was gone, walking back to the marshal's office to take first watch, leaving Clara alone in the moonlight with a promise she had no intention of keeping. She went inside and climbed the stairs to her room, but sleep felt impossible now. Instead, she sat by the window, cleaning and reloading her revolver, practicing the motions Rowan had taught her until they felt natural as breathing. 6 rounds, 6 chances to change the outcome. 6 opportunities to prove that sometimes the hunted became the hunters. Somewhere to the southeast, Magnus Veron was gathering his men and plotting revenge. In Covenant, Clara Wynne was preparing to meet him with bullets and defiance. And between them lay 3 days that would determine whether 2 wounded souls found redemption or just more elaborate ways to die. Dawn came too quickly and brought with it the kind of clarity that made Clara's chest tight. She'd spent half the night at her window watching Covenant sleep, wondering how many of these people would be alive in 3 days. The other half she'd spent checking her revolver, loading and unloading until her fingers knew the rhythm blind. Rowan was already in the street when she came down, working with Deputy Hollis and a handful of townsmen to fortify the marshal's office. They were stacking sandbags against the windows, positioning barrels of water in case of fire, creating firing positions that would give them cover and clear sight lines. "Morning," Rowan said when he saw her. His eyes were shadowed from lack of sleep, but his hands were steady on the rifle he was checking. "Put me to work," Clara said. He studied her for a moment, then nodded toward a wagon loaded with supplies. "We're setting up a medical station in the church. Sarah Pritchard's organizing it, and she needs help moving supplies." Clara found Sarah in the church with 3 other women, transforming pews into makeshift hospital beds. The older woman looked up as Clara entered, and something in her expression softened. "You don't have to help with this," Sarah said. "You've done enough already, bringing this fight to our doorstep." "I didn't bring anything. Magnus Veron did. I'm just the excuse he's using." Clara picked up a crate of bandages. "Where do you want these?" They worked in silence for a while, the only sounds the rustle of fabric and the distant hammering from outside. The church smelled like old wood and candle wax, peaceful in a way that felt fragile. Clara tried to imagine it filled with wounded men, blood on the floorboards, the air thick with gun smoke and screaming. You love him, Sarah said suddenly. Clara nearly dropped the jar of carbolic she was carrying. What? Rowan Cade. You love him. It wasn't a question. I barely know him. Sometimes that's all it takes. One look, one moment, one choice that changes everything. Sarah set down the linen she was folding. I knew my husband 3 days before we married. 20 years we had together before consumption took him. Best 3 days in 20 years of my life. We're not, Clara fumbled for words. It's not like that. Isn't it? You risked your life for him, rode back into gunfire when any sane person would have run. That's not gratitude, child. That's something deeper. Clara sat down on a pew, suddenly exhausted. It doesn't matter what I feel. We're both probably going to die in 3 days. All the more reason to be honest about it. Sarah joined her, taking Clara's hand in her work-roughened ones. I've lived long enough to know that love doesn't wait for convenient times. It comes when it comes, and you either grab hold or spend your life wondering what if. He's being hunted by a man who owns half the territory. I'm running from a contract that says I'm property. Neither of us has a future worth planning. Then make one. Fight for it. That's what this is all about, isn't it? Fighting for the right to choose your own life instead of accepting the one dealt to you. Before Clara could answer, the church door banged open and Deputy Hollis burst in, breathless and pale. Riders coming, he gasped. 2 of them, from the southeast. Clara's heart lurched. Varen's men? Don't know yet. Marshal wants everyone in position. They ran. Clara grabbed her revolver from where she'd left it on the altar and followed Hollis outside. The town had transformed in the hour she'd been in the church. Every building now had rifles poking from windows. Every alley had defenders positioned with clear firing lanes. Rowan and Marshal Webb stood in the center of the street, both armed, both watching the horizon where dust marked the approaching riders. Could be scouts, Webb said, or it could be a parley. Varen doesn't parley, Rowan replied. He dictates. Then let's hear what he has to dictate and tell him where he can shove it. The riders materialized from the dust, 2 men on good horses, one carrying a white flag. They pulled up 50 yards from the marshal's office, and the man with the flag called out, We're here under flag of truce. Magnus Varon requests a meeting with Marshal Webb and Rowan Cade. Tell Varon if he wants to talk, he can ride in himself, Webb shouted back. Mr. Varon doesn't take orders from lawmen, he gives them. The rider's voice was cold, professional. You have 1 hour to produce Rowan Cade, or we return with 20 men and burn this town to the ground. Clara felt rage spike hot through her veins. She stepped forward before Rowan could stop her, her voice carrying across the distance. Tell Magnus Varon that Rowan Cade isn't property to be produced. Tell him that Covenant doesn't bow to threats. And tell him if he wants war, we'll give him one he'll regret. The rider's gaze fixed on her, and something like amusement flickered in his expression. And who are you, girl? Someone who killed 3 of your men already. Try me and I'll make it 4. Clara, Rowan warned, but there was something in his voice that wasn't quite disapproval. The rider with the flag turned to his companion, exchanged quiet words. Then he looked back at them, and his face was hard as stone. 1 hour, he repeated. After that, everything burns. They turned their horses and rode back the way they'd come, leaving nothing but dust and ultimatums behind. Well, Webb said into the silence, I guess we know where we stand. We need to evacuate civilians, Rowan said. Women, children, anyone who can't fight. Get them out before the hour's up. Where? There's nowhere to go except open desert. The canyon where we camped, 2 days south, hidden, with water. They can wait there until this is over. Webb nodded. Tom, start spreading the word. Anyone who can't or won't fight needs to leave now. Take the wagon, pack supplies for a week. Hollis ran to comply, and within minutes the town was in controlled chaos. Women gathered children, men loaded wagons with food and water. The elderly were helped onto horses. Sarah Pritchard appeared at Clara's elbow. I'm staying, she said before Clara could speak. This is my home. I'll defend it. You should go with the others. This isn't your fight. It became my fight when they threatened to burn my home. Besides, someone needs to run the medical station, and I'm the closest thing Covenant has to a doctor. Sarah's jaw was set, immovable. I've already buried 1 person I loved. I won't run from the chance to save others. Clara understood that sometimes standing your ground was the only dignity left. She nodded, and Sarah squeezed her shoulder before heading back to the church. The wagon left 20 minutes later, loaded with 15 women and children and 3 old men too frail to fight. Clara watched them go and felt something twist in her chest. 15 lives saved if this went badly. 15 futures bought with whatever happened next. You should have gone with them, Rowan said, appearing beside her. We've had this conversation. I didn't listen then either. Clara, no. She turned to face him, and all the words she'd been holding back came rushing up. I know what you're going to say. That I'm young, that I have my whole life ahead of me, that dying here is a waste, but you're wrong. Dying as someone's property would be a waste. Dying without ever choosing my own path would be a waste. This? Fighting for something that matters? That's living. You could still live somewhere else, somewhere safe. There is no safe. Not for people like us. Drummond will hunt me, Varen will hunt you, and running just means dying tired. She touched his face, traced the scar that marked him. I'd rather die on my feet beside you than live on my knees anywhere else. He caught her hand, held it against his cheek. His eyes were storm gray and full of things he couldn't say. You're the bravest person I've ever met. I'm terrified. That's what makes it brave. The moment stretched between them, fragile and fierce, and Clara thought he might kiss her, wanted him to kiss her, wanted to know what that felt like before the world exploded into violence. But Webb's voice cut through the moment. They're coming! Riders on the southeast road! The spell broke. Rowan's hand dropped from hers and went to his rifle. How many? 23 that I can count, maybe more. Positions! Rowan commanded, and suddenly he was someone else. Not the quiet man who'd saved her in the desert, but a warrior who'd fought this fight before. Clara, you're in the church with Sarah. Upper windows, good sight lines. Don't waste bullets on long shots. Where will you be? Marshall's office with Webb. We'll hold the center. He gripped her shoulders. Remember what I taught you. Breathe, aim, squeeze, and if it goes bad, it won't. But if it does, you run. Promise me. Clara had promised once before and lied. This time, she didn't even bother with the lie. She kissed him instead, hard and desperate and full of everything they hadn't said, and then she was running for the church before he could stop her, before fear could catch up with her courage. The church windows gave her a clear view of the southeast road. She could see them now, a line of riders spread across the width of the street, walking their horses slow and deliberate. They weren't in a hurry. Why would they be? They had numbers and experience, and a man willing to pay them for murder. At their head rode Magnus Varon himself. Clara had never seen him before, but she knew him instantly. He sat his black horse like a king on a throne, tall and broad-shouldered, with silver-shot dark hair, and a face that might have been handsome if it wasn't so cold. He wore expensive clothes and carried himself with the absolute certainty of someone who'd never been denied anything he wanted. Behind him, his men spread out, hard-faced killers with rifles across their saddles and pistols on their hips. Clara counted them twice. 23. Against 14 defenders, most of whom were shopkeepers and farmers who'd maybe fired a gun at a coyote once or twice. The odds were terrible. The odds didn't matter. Varen pulled up in the center of the street, 100 yards from the marshal's office. His voice carried clear in the morning air. Rowan Cade, I know you're here. Come out and face what you've earned. Webb stepped out of his office, rifle in hand. This is Marshal James Webb, and you're trespassing on my jurisdiction. Turn around and ride out, Varen. I'm not here for you, Marshal. I'm here for the man who murdered my brother. Your brother raped and killed an innocent girl. Cade executed justice when the law wouldn't. Justice. Varen's laugh was ugly. Call it what you want. I call it a debt unpaid. He raised his voice. Cade, last chance. Come out and die clean, or I'll dig you out and make everyone in this town pay for hiding you. Rowan emerged from the marshal's office, and Clara's breath caught. He looked small against the line of riders, one man against an army. But he didn't look afraid. He looked like someone who'd made peace with dying as long as it meant something. I'm here, Varen, he called. You want me? Come and take me. That's the plan, Varen signaled to his men. Kill Cade. The rest of you can burn. Everything happened at once. Varen's men drew their weapons and charged. Rowan and Webb dove back into the marshal's office. Rifles cracked from every window in town, and the air filled with smoke and thunder and the scream of horses. Clara sighted on a rider coming up the left flank. Breathed out, squeezed. The revolver bucked in her hand and the rider jerked but didn't fall. She cocked and fired again, and this time he went down, tumbling from his saddle. One down. 22 to go. Beside her, Sarah was firing a hunting rifle with grim efficiency, working the bolt and shooting, working the bolt and shooting. Down the street, Clara could hear the continuous roar of gunfire as every defender poured lead into the charging riders. 3 men fell in the first volley. 4. But the rest kept coming, spreading out, taking cover behind troughs and wagons and anything that would stop a bullet. They returned fire, and Clara heard glass shatter as rounds punched through windows. Someone screamed, whether attacker or defender she couldn't tell. The charge broke against the town's defenses like a wave against rocks. Varon's men dismounted, using their horses for cover, and the fight devolved into a brutal exchange of gunfire at close range. Clara reloaded with shaking hands, dumping spent shells and feeding in fresh rounds while bullets whined overhead. "They're trying to flank us!" Sarah shouted. "East side!" Clara looked and saw 3 men running between buildings, trying to circle around to attack from an undefended angle. She leaned out the window and fired 3 times, driving them back but not stopping them. They disappeared into an alley. "They'll come up behind the general store!" Clara shouted to Sarah. "Warn the defenders!" But before Sarah could move, fire blossomed from the southeast. One of Varon's men had thrown a torch onto a roof, and flames were already eating into dry wood. Another torch arced through the air, landed on the livery stable. Smoke began to pour into the street. "They're burning us out!" someone yelled. Clara's mind raced. Fire changed everything. The defenders couldn't stay in burning buildings, but leaving cover meant exposing themselves to Varon's rifles. It was a trap, and they were caught in it, unless they turned the trap around. "Sarah!" Clara grabbed the older woman's arm. "Get to the marshal. Tell Webb to fall back to the church. We'll make our stand here." "The church will burn too." "Not if we stop them first. Go!" Sarah ran, and Clara fired out the window, keeping Varon's men pinned while the plan formed in her mind. The church was stone, not wood. It wouldn't burn as easily, and from here they could cover the entire town center. If they could draw all the defenders back to one position, consolidate their forces, they might survive. Might. Webb got the message. She heard him shouting orders, saw defenders abandoning their positions and running for the church. They came in 1s and 2s, dodging bullets, dragging wounded. Clara and the other shooters in the church provided covering fire, and somehow they all made it. 14 men and 2 women crowded into the church, bloody and desperate, and down to their last boxes of ammunition. Webb's face was grim as he surveyed his force. "We've got maybe 20 minutes before they overrun us," he said. "Anyone got ideas?" "We could surrender," someone suggested weakly. "Varon doesn't take prisoners," Rowan replied. He was bleeding from a gash on his forehead, blood running into his eye, but his hands were steady on his rifle. "We fight, or we die. Those are the only choices." "Then we make them pay for killing us," Webb said. They fortified the church as best they could, stacking pews in front of windows, positioning shooters to cover every approach. Outside, Varon's men were regrouping, and Clara could see the cattle baron himself directing them, pointing toward the church. He knew where his prey had gone to ground. "Here they come!" Hollis shouted. The assault was coordinated this time. Varon's men came from 3 sides at once, laying down suppressing fire while others advanced. The church defenders shot back, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. For every attacker they dropped, 2 more seemed to take his place. Clara fired until her revolver clicked empty, reloaded, fired again. Her hands were black with powder residue, her ears ringing so badly she could barely hear. The church filled with smoke and the copper smell of blood. Men were shouting, cursing, praying. Someone fell beside her, one of the townsmen, shot through the throat, dying before he hit the floor. Clara pulled his rifle from his hands and kept firing. They were going to die here. All of them. The thought was crystal clear, without emotion. They'd fought well, but mathematics didn't care about courage. 17 against 14. and the 17 had more bullets. Then Rowan was beside her, his face gray with pain, blood soaking his shirt. "You're hit," Clara said. "I'm fine." "You're bleeding." "I'm alive. That's what matters." He checked his rifle, found it empty, drew his revolver. "Clara, listen to me. There's a root cellar beneath the altar. Sarah knows where it is. When I give the signal, you and her get down there and hide. Wait until they're gone, then—" "No." "Clara, I said no!" She grabbed his coat, pulled him close so he could hear her over the gunfire. "I'm not hiding while you die. I'm not leaving you." "You have to—" The church door exploded inward, and 3 of Varen's men burst through, guns blazing. Webb shot 2 before they cleared the threshold, but the 3rd made it inside, and then it was chaos. Hand-to-hand fighting, too close for rifles, men grappling and punching and dying in the space between pews. Clara saw Varen step through the doorway, saw him raise his pistol toward Rowan's back. She moved without thinking, throwing herself between them as Varen fired. The impact spun her sideways, pain blooming hot and sharp in her shoulder. She fell, and the world tilted sideways. Through dimming vision, she saw Rowan turn, saw his face transform from shock to rage. He charged Varen, and the 2 men went down in a tangle of limbs and violence. Someone was screaming, maybe her. Hands grabbed her, pulled her behind the altar. Sarah's face swam into view, pale and frightened. "Stay with me, child. Stay with me." But Claire's eyes were locked on the fight. Rowan and Varen rolling across the floor, each trying to get a hand free, a weapon clear, an advantage. Varen was bigger, heavier, but Rowan fought with the desperation of someone with nothing left to lose. They crashed into a pew, wood splintering. Varen got his gun up. Rowan knocked it aside. The shot went wild, punching through the ceiling. They grappled for control of the weapon, and Clara saw with terrible clarity that Rowan was weakening. Too much blood loss, too much exertion, too much everything. Varen was going to win. Clara tried to stand, but her legs wouldn't work. The wound in her shoulder was on fire, stealing her strength, stealing her breath. She dropped her revolver when she fell, and now she couldn't reach it. There. Her fingers closed around the grip. 6 shots, 1 chance. She raised the gun with a hand that shook like leaves, sighted down the barrel. Varen and Rowan were still fighting, still rolling, impossible to get a clear shot without hitting Rowan. Then Varen broke free, stood, raised his pistol toward Rowan's head. Time slowed. Clara could see his finger tightening on the trigger, could see Rowan looking up at the death descending toward him, could see the end of everything. She fired. The bullet caught Varen in the knee, shattering bone and cartilage and the certainty in his eyes. He screamed and fell, his shot going wide. Rowan rolled, grabbed a fallen rifle, and swung it like a club. The stock connected with Varen's skull with a sound like breaking pottery. The cattle baron went down and didn't get up. The fight drained out of Varen's remaining men all at once. With their leader dead or dying, with half their force scattered across Covenant streets, they broke. Just turned and ran, mounting whatever horses they could find and riding hard for the horizon. Webb let them go. His remaining deputies, there were only 3 now, let them go. Everyone was too tired, too hurt, too grateful to be alive to chase. Silence fell over Covenant like snow. Clara lay where she'd fallen, the revolver still clutched in her hand, and watched Rowan stumble toward her. His face was a mask of blood and terror and relief. He dropped to his knees beside her, hands hovering over her wound, afraid to touch. "You shot him," he said. "You saved me." "Told you I wouldn't leave." Her voice sounded far away, dreamy. "Told you we'd see this through together." "You're bleeding." "So are you." "I'm fine." "Liar." Sarah was there with bandages, pressing them against Clara's shoulder. The pressure sent lightning through her veins, and she gasped, gripping Rowan's hand hard enough to bruise. "The bullet went clean through," Sarah said. "That's good. Nothing vital hit. She'll live if we keep the wound clean." "She's going to be fine," Rowan said, and Clara couldn't tell if he was talking to Sarah or himself. "She has to be fine." "I'm fine," Clara whispered. "Just tired. So tired." "Then rest. I'll be right here." She closed her eyes and let the darkness take her, trusting that when she woke, Rowan would still be there, and the fight would be over, and they'd both somehow survived impossible odds to see another sunrise. Clara woke to afternoon light streaming through a window she didn't recognize and pain that reminded her she was alive. Her shoulder throbbed with each heartbeat, a dull fire that spread down her arm and across her chest. When she tried to sit up, the room tilted sideways and nausea rolled through her stomach. Easy. Rowan's voice, rough with exhaustion, his hand pressed gently against her good shoulder, steadying her. You've been out for 6 hours. Sarah says you need to stay still or you'll tear the stitches. Clara blinked the world into focus. She was in her room at the boarding house, lying in the bed she'd barely slept in. Rowan sat in the chair beside her, his own wounds bandaged, his face drawn with pain he was trying to hide. Blood had soaked through the wrapping around his ribs, dark and spreading. You're hurt worse than me, she said. I've had worse. That's not reassuring. Wasn't meant to be. He managed a ghost of a smile. How do you feel? Like I got shot. Good. Means your sense of humor survived. Clara tried to laugh and gasped instead as pain lanced through her shoulder. Rowan's hand found hers, warm and steady, and she gripped it like an anchor. Varen? She asked when she could breathe again. Dead. Never woke up after you shot him. No triumph in his voice, just weary fact. His men scattered. Webb sent word to the territorial marshal about what happened. Self-defense, protection of the town. Nobody's coming after us for it. The others? Rowan's expression darkened. We lost 5. Tom Hollis took a bullet in the chest. He died before we could get him to Sarah. 3 townsmen and Webb's older deputy. 8 more wounded, but they'll live. He looked down at their joined hands. Could have been worse, should have been worse, given the odds. We won. We survived. That's not always the same as winning. Clara understood that. Victory was supposed to feel triumphant, glorious. Instead, it just felt exhausted and sad, tainted by the knowledge of what it cost. 5 men who'd defended their home were dead. Families would mourn. The town would heal but never forget. Drummond, she said suddenly. Silas Drummond. With Varen dead. Webb sent a wire. Turns out Drummond's contract with your stepfather was fraudulent, signed under duress, witnessed by men on Drummond's payroll. Territorial judge ruled it void. You're free, Clara. Legally and completely. The words didn't feel real. Free. After 19 years of being property, first her mother's burden, then her stepfather's commodity, then Drummond's purchased bride, she was just Clara Wynne. No ownership, no obligations except the ones she chose. I don't know how to be free, she whispered. Neither do I. I guess we'll figure it out together. The simplicity of that promise, together, cracked something open in Clara's chest. Tears came suddenly, unexpectedly, and Rowan pulled her carefully against his good side, letting her cry into his shoulder while his hand stroked her hair. I killed a man, she said between sobs. I shot Varen, and I'd do it again, and I don't know what that makes me. Human, flawed and fierce and willing to fight for what matters. He kissed the top of her head, gentle as breathing. You saved my life. That's all that matters to me. Your sister would have liked you. She always had a soft spot for people who refused to break. His voice went thick with old grief. Her name was Emma. She was 21 when Thomas Varen took her from a dance and left her body in a ditch like trash. I spent 2 years hunting him, and when I finally found him, I made sure he knew exactly why he was dying. Do you regret it? Killing him? No. The life I lost because of it? Sometimes. He was quiet for a moment. But if I hadn't been running, I wouldn't have found you in that desert. Wouldn't have had these weeks. Wouldn't have learned that sometimes the thing you're running from leads you exactly where you need to be. Clara pulled back enough to look at his face. Even battered and exhausted, even marked by scars and violence, he was the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen. Not because of how he looked, but because of who he was. A man who'd chosen honor over ease, who'd saved her without asking for anything, who'd stood between her and death more times than she could count. I love you, she said. The words felt too small for what she meant, but they were all she had. I know it's too soon and too complicated, and we're both too broken, but I love you anyway. Rowan went very still. His eyes searched hers, looking for doubt or fear or hesitation, finding none. You shouldn't, he said finally. I'm a killer with a past that won't stay buried. And I'm a runaway with a talent for violence I didn't know I had. Seems like we match. She touched his scarred face, traced the line that marked him. You're the first man who ever saw me as human instead of property. The first one who taught me I could fight instead of just endure. The first one who made me want to live instead of just survive. Clara. And if you're about to tell me I'm young and don't know what I want, save your breath. I've known poverty and abuse and men who thought my body was theirs to buy. I know exactly what I'm choosing when I choose you. He caught her hand, pressed it against his chest where she could feel his heart hammering. I'm choosing you too. Have been since the desert, since you looked at me with those defiant eyes and decided to trust me anyway. His voice dropped to barely a whisper. You're the bravest person I've ever met, and if you'll have me, I'll spend the rest of my life trying to deserve you. You already do. He kissed her then, careful of her wound, careful of his own injuries, but fierce with all the things they'd left unsaid. Clara kissed him back and tasted salt. Tears from one or both of them, she couldn't tell. The kiss was promise and apology and choice all tangled together, and when they finally pulled apart, something had shifted. The world was still broken and dangerous, but they were facing it together now, and that made all the difference. A knock at the door interrupted them. Sarah entered carrying a tray with soup and bread, her expression softening when she saw them. About time you two figured that out, she said, setting the tray down. I was starting to think you'd both die of stubbornness before admitting how you felt. How long have you known? Clara asked. Since the moment you walked back into gunfire for him. Love or stupidity, I figured, and you didn't strike me as stupid. Sarah checked Clara's bandages with practiced efficiency. The wound's clean, no sign of infection. You'll heal, but you need to rest and eat, both of you. She left them alone with the food, and they ate in comfortable silence, sharing the soup between them. Clara's appetite was weak but present, and the warmth in her stomach helped push back the lingering shock and pain. What happens now? She asked when they'd finished. Webb offered me a job as deputy. Says Covenant could use a man who knows how to fight. The pay's not much, but it comes with a house on the edge of town and a chance to stop running. Rowan looked at her carefully. I told him I'd think about it. Wanted to ask you first. Ask me what? If you want to stay, build a life here. Or if you'd rather keep moving, find someplace bigger, somewhere with more opportunities. Clara thought about Covenant. The dusty streets, the small houses, the people who'd fought beside them and mourned their dead together. It wasn't grand or glamorous. It was just a frontier town trying to survive against the odds. But it was honest, real. And it was offering them something neither had ever really had. A home. I want to stay, she said. I want to wake up in the same place twice. I want to know my neighbors' names. I want to plant something and watch it grow instead of just running past. Relief flooded Rowan's face. Then we'll stay. I'll take the deputy job and you, what do you want to do? Sarah mentioned the town needs a school teacher. Says the last one left 6 months ago to get married. I can read and write and cipher. I could teach children those things. Help them have choices I never had. You'd be good at it. You're patient and stubborn, and you don't let anyone tell you what you can't do. He smiled. Those kids won't know what hit them. They talked through the afternoon, planning a future that felt impossible and perfect in equal measure. A small house on the edge of town, a garden for Clara to tend, horses in the stable, and a life built one choice at a time. It wasn't the fairy tale ending Clara had read about in the few books she'd encountered. There were no castles or princes, no magic to wash away their scars. Just two broken people deciding to heal together. As evening fell, Sarah returned with Marshal Webb. The lawman looked older than he had that morning, grief etched deep in the lines around his eyes. We buried Tom and the others this afternoon, he said without preamble. Proper ceremony, the whole town there. I gave your regrets, said you were too injured to attend. I should have been there, Rowan said. You were where you needed to be. Besides, you can pay your respects tomorrow when you're stronger. Webb pulled up another chair, settled into it with a grunt. I came to tell you the territorial marshal sent word. Varen's ranch is being seized by the territory for back taxes and criminal enterprise. Turns out he's been running guns to Apache renegades, skimming from government beef contracts, and about 15 other crimes. His empire's dissolving as we speak. Good, Clara said. Let it rot. My thoughts exactly. But it means Varen's men are scattering, looking for new employment or new territory. Some of them might hold grudges. Webb looked at Rowan. You still want that deputy job, knowing we might have more trouble coming? Trouble's been coming my whole life. At least now I'll be facing it with a badge and backup. Rowan squeezed Clara's hand. When do I start? Give yourself a week to heal. After that, you're officially on the Covenant payroll. Webb stood, settled his hat. Oh, and the town council wants to throw a celebration next month. Gratitude for defending the town, memorial for those we lost. They're calling it Covenant Day. He smiled thin. Figures we nearly had to die to get a holiday. After he left, Sarah helped Clara into a clean nightgown and redressed her wound. The stitches pulled tight, but the bleeding had stopped and the flesh around them looked healthy. Rowan waited outside the door with the kind of careful distance that suggested Sarah had given him pointed instructions about propriety. He can stay, Clara said when Sarah was finished. I don't want to be alone. I figured as much. Just keep your hands to yourselves until those stitches heal, or I'll have both your hides. Sarah's stern expression softened. You're good for each other. I'm glad you found what I had with my Thomas, even if it came through blood and bullets. She left them alone as full dark settled over Covenant. Rowan pulled the chair close to Clara's bed and took her hand, and they sat in comfortable silence while the town settled into sleep around them. Tell me about Emma, Clara said quietly. Tell me who she was before Varen took her. Rowan was silent so long Clara thought he wouldn't answer. Then words came slow, each one carefully chosen. She loved horses. Could gentle the wildest Mustang with patience and sugar cubes, and that voice she had, soft as rain on desert sand. She wanted to run a breeding program, raise the finest horses in the territory, had the talent for it too. His thumb traced circles on Clara's palm. She sang while she worked, drove me crazy when we were kids, but I'd give anything to hear it again. She sounds wonderful. She was, and Thomas Varen saw her at a dance and decided he wanted her. When she refused him, he waited until she was riding alone, and his voice fractured. I found her 3 days later. What he did to her. He couldn't finish. Clara gripped his hand tighter. You gave her justice. That matters. Does it? She's still dead. I'm still the man who killed in her name. And all these years later, I don't know if what I did was honor or just revenge dressed in better clothes. Maybe it's both. Maybe it's neither. Maybe it's just the choice you made with the options you had, and you've been punishing yourself for it ever since. Clara pulled him down until his forehead rested against hers. Emma's gone. You can't bring her back. But you can honor her by living the life she never got to have, by being happy, by choosing love instead of guilt. I don't know how. Then we'll learn together, because I don't know how to be free, and you don't know how to be happy. And maybe that's exactly what we need, two people learning how to live instead of just survive. He kissed her again, gentle and grateful, and Clara felt something shift in him. Not healing. Healing took time, but the beginning of it, the first crack in the armor he'd built around his heart. They talked through the night, trading stories. Clara told him about her mother, dead from fever when Clara was 8, leaving her with a stepfather who saw her as a burden to be monetized. About years of working herself raw to pay for his drinking, his gambling, his absolute failure to be anything resembling a parent. About the night he came home with Drummond's contract and told her she should be grateful someone wanted her. Rowan told her about growing up on a small ranch, about learning to rope and ride and read the land from a father who died too young, about Emma raising him when their mother couldn't cope with widowhood, about the day he came home to find his sister gone and his whole world reduced to ash and vengeance. They talked about the people they'd been before this journey and the people they were becoming after it. Clara fell asleep near dawn with her hand still in Rowan's and dreamed for the first time in years about something other than running. The week passed in a blur of healing and quiet domesticity. Clara's wound knitted slowly, the angry red fading to pink, the pain diminishing from fire to ache to mere discomfort. Rowan's injuries healed faster. He'd had more practice, he said with dark humor, and by the 4th day he was moving almost normally, though Clara caught him favoring his wounded side when he thought she wasn't watching. The town rebuilt around them. The burned buildings were torn down and new frames went up, The community coming together with lumber and nails and the stubborn determination of people who refused to be broken. The bodies of Varen's men were buried in an unmarked plot outside town, and nobody spoke their names or mourned their passing. Some deaths deserved remembering. Others deserved only silence and dust. On the 8th day, Rowan took his oath as deputy and pinned the star to his chest. Clara stood beside him in front of the marshal's office while half the town watched, and when Webb administered the oath, she felt something warm bloom in her chest. Pride, maybe. Or hope. Or just the simple satisfaction of watching someone she loved step into light after years of running through shadows. That afternoon, she met with the town council about the school teacher position. They interviewed her in the church, 5 men and 2 women, asking about her education and her ability to manage children and her plans for curriculum. Clara answered honestly about her limited schooling but extensive reading, about her belief that every child deserved the chance to learn regardless of gender or circumstance. The oldest council member, a severe woman named Mrs. Harding, fixed Clara with a sharp eye and asked, "We've heard you're living in sin with Deputy Cade. How do you expect to teach morality to children when you can't demonstrate it yourself?" Clara met her gaze and didn't flinch. "Ma'am, I expect to teach children reading and arithmetic and the basic skills they'll need to survive in this world. As for morality, I can teach them that people should be judged by their character and choices, not by what others assume about them, and that surviving impossible odds and defending your community counts for something, even if you don't wear a wedding ring while doing it." Silence fell. Mrs. Harding's expression was unreadable. Then the woman's mouth twitched into something almost like a smile. "Fair answer. Anyone else have questions?" Nobody did. They voted unanimously to hire her, starting salary of $20 a month plus use of the schoolhouse living quarters if she wanted them. Clara thanked them and walked out into the sunshine, feeling like she'd won something more valuable than gold. She found Rowan at the marshal's office, studying maps with Webb and planning patrol routes. When she told him about the job, his face lit with genuine pleasure. "Told you those kids wouldn't know what hit them." "We need to talk," Clara said, "about what Mrs. Harding said." "About living in sin." Rowan's expression went carefully neutral. "We're not living together. You're at the boarding house. I'm in the deputy quarters." "That's not the point. The point is, in a small town, appearances matter. And if I'm going to teach children, I can't give their parents ammunition to use against me." "What are you saying?" Clara took a breath and said the thing that had been building in her chest since the night they'd confessed their feelings. "I'm saying we should get married, properly, with a preacher and witnesses and all the things that make it legal and binding." Rowan went very still. "You want to marry me?" "Yes." "Because of what Mrs. Harding said?" "No, because I love you. And I want to build a life with you. And I'm tired of pretending we're not already planning forever together." She stepped closer, took his hands. "I know it's fast. I know we've only known each other a few weeks. But we've lived more in those weeks than most people live in years. And I'm not interested in waiting for the perfect moment because perfect doesn't exist. This is what we have, imperfect and scarred and real. So I'm asking you, Rowan Cade, will you marry me?" His throat worked, his hands tightened on hers. "I have nothing to offer you. No family, no wealth, just a deputy's salary and a past that won't stay buried. And I have a bullet scar and a talent for shooting people and exactly 3 dresses to my name. So we're starting even." She smiled. "Besides, I'm not marrying you for what you have. I'm marrying you for who you are." "Who am I?" "The man who saved my life. The man who taught me to fight. The man who makes me want to be brave instead of just desperate." Her voice dropped. "The man I love, the only man I'll ever love." Rowan pulled her close, careful of her healing shoulder, and buried his face in her hair. "Yes. God help us both, yes." They were married 3 weeks later in the same church where they'd made their stand against Varen's men. The bullet holes in the walls had been patched but not painted, leaving pale scars that matched their own. Clara wore a new dress, cream-colored calico that Sarah and the other women had sewn together, simple but clean and whole. Rowan wore his only suit, brushed and mended, with his deputy's star pinned over his heart. Marshall Webb stood as witness, along with Sarah Pritchard and half of Covenant's population. The preacher was a circuit rider named Father Michaels, an old man with kind eyes who'd seen enough of life to ask no questions about speed or circumstance. "Do you, Rowan Cade, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do." "Do you, Clara Wynne, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Clara looked at Rowan and saw her whole future written in his storm-gray eyes, saw the house they'd build, the children they might have, the life they'd forge from nothing but will and love and stubborn refusal to give up, saw mornings waking beside him and evenings watching sunsets together and all the small precious moments that made a life worth living. "I do," Father Michaels smiled. Then, "By the authority vested in me by God and the territory of New Mexico, I pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride." Rowan cupped her face in his scarred hands and kissed her like she was oxygen and he'd been drowning. Clara kissed him back and heard the church erupt in applause, but all she could focus on was this moment, this man, this impossible joy of choosing and being chosen in return. When they pulled apart, Rowan whispered against her lips, "You were my first." Clara smiled. "What?" "You asked me once in the desert what you were to me. Now I'm telling you, you were the first woman I ever trusted after Emma died. The first person who made me want to live instead of just exist. The first and only woman I'll ever love." He touched her forehead to his. "And you'll be my last. My last battle, my last adventure, my last everything." Tears spilled hot down Clara's cheeks. "I used to think being first meant being best. But being last? Being last means being forever. Then let's be forever." They walked out of the church into afternoon sunshine, hand in hand, and Covenant celebrated around them. Someone had organized a party in the street, tables loaded with food, a fiddle player striking up a tune, children running between adults' legs. It wasn't grand or sophisticated. It was simple and honest and exactly right. Clara danced with her husband, a strange, wonderful word that still felt foreign on her tongue, while the town that had become home watched and cheered. She was terrible at dancing, had never learned the steps, but Rowan guided her through them with patient grace, and she laughed when she stepped on his toes. "Sorry," she gasped. "Don't be. I like you clumsy." "Why?" "Because it means you're real, not some perfect dream I'll wake up from." He spun her in a circle that made her head spin and her heart soar. "You're real and mine and the best thing that ever happened to me." "Even better than revenge?" "Infinitely better. Revenge is just rage with a target. You're joy with a future." They danced until the sun set and the stars came out, until the party wound down and people drifted back to their homes. Sarah Pritchard had prepared the small house that came with Rowan's deputy position, filling it with food and flowers and fresh linens. She hugged them both at the door. "Be happy," she said simply. "That's all. Just be happy." They crossed the threshold together, and Rowan kicked the door shut behind them. The house was small, just 2 rooms and a kitchen, but it was clean and solid and theirs. Their furniture, their dishes, their life waiting to be lived. Clara turned to face her husband and felt suddenly shy. They'd shared danger and fear and violence, but this was different. This was choosing each other without urgency or crisis driving them, choosing ordinary intimacy instead of extraordinary survival. "Nervous?" Rowan asked softly. "A little. You?" "Terrified. I've killed men, fought battles, stared down death a dozen times. But this? Making you happy? That scares me more than anything." Clara took his hand and pressed it over her heart. "You already make me happy. Everything else is just learning how to show it." He kissed her then, slow and deep, and Clara felt the last walls between them crumble into dust. They'd been through fire and blood and loss, had earned the right to this gentleness, this privacy, this moment that belonged only to them. She pulled back just enough to whisper, I don't know how. Neither do I. Not like this. Not with someone I love." He touched her face with infinite care. "So we'll figure it out together, slow and careful, and if anything hurts or scares you, you tell me and we stop. Promise?" "Promise." They moved to the bedroom, and what happened there was private and sacred and theirs alone. But when morning came and Clara woke wrapped in her husband's arms, she felt fundamentally changed. Not because of physical intimacy, but because of trust. Because they'd been vulnerable with each other, and neither had broken. Life settled into rhythm after that. Clara started teaching in the one-room schoolhouse, 15 students ranging from 6 to 14, all hungry for knowledge they'd been denied by distance and poverty. She taught them reading and writing and arithmetic, but also dignity and choice, and the radical idea that their circumstances didn't define their futures. Rowan rode patrol with Marshal Webb, keeping peace in Covenant and the surrounding territory. They dealt with cattle thieves and claim jumpers, and the occasional drunk who needed a night in jail to reconsider his life choices. It was honest work, the kind that let Rowan sleep at night without nightmares of Emma's death or Thomas Varen's last moments. Some nights they sat on their porch and watched the sun paint the desert in shades of gold and crimson. Clara would lean against Rowan's chest, his arms around her, and they'd talk about their day or their plans or nothing at all. Sometimes they were silent, content just to exist together in the space they'd carved from chaos. 3 months after the wedding, Clara realized she'd missed her monthly bleeding. Fear and joy warred in her chest in equal measure. She told Rowan that night after supper, watching his face carefully for his reaction. He went very still. A baby. Maybe. It's too early to be certain. But maybe. Yes. He pulled her into his arms, careful as always, and she felt his chest hitch with emotion. I never thought, after everything, I never let myself imagine. Neither did I. But Rowan, I'm scared. What if I'm like my mother? What if I can't do this? Then we'll figure it out together, same as everything else. He pulled back, cupped her face. You're the strongest person I know, Clara Cade. You survived things that would have broken anyone else. You'll survive this too. And I'll be right beside you every step. The baby came the following spring, a daughter with Rowan's gray eyes and Clara's stubborn chin. They named her Emma, after the sister whose death had sent Rowan on the path that led to Clara. It felt right, closing the circle, transforming grief into hope. Clara held her daughter in the same church where they'd married, where they'd fought, where they'd chosen each other again and again. The same church that now baptized Emma Cade while Covenant watched and celebrated. Marshal Webb stood as godfather, Sarah Pritchard as godmother, and Clara felt her heart so full it might burst. She's perfect, Rowan whispered, touching his daughter's tiny hand with fingers that had dealt death and now cradled life. She's ours, Clara said, ours to protect and raise and teach, to be brave. Like her mother. Like both her parents. They walked home through Covenant's familiar streets, past the schoolhouse where Clara taught, and the marshal's office where Rowan worked, and the general store, and the church, and all the ordinary places that made up their extraordinary life. People called out greetings as they passed, and Clara returned them with a smile that came easy now. She'd been Clara Wynne once, a girl running from ownership and death, with nothing but desperation and a dying horse. Then she'd been Clara Cade, a woman learning to fight and choose and love. Now she was simply Clara, wife, mother, teacher, survivor, fighter, free. The journey from that desert to this doorstep had been measured in blood and bullets and hard-won choice. But she'd walked every mile of it, and she'd do it again tomorrow without hesitation. Because this life she'd built with Rowan, imperfect and scarred and real, was worth every sacrifice. That night, after Emma was asleep in her cradle and the house was quiet, Clara and Rowan sat on their porch and watched the stars wheel overhead. The same stars that had witnessed their first meeting, their first fight, their first choice to trust instead of run. Do you ever regret it? Clara asked. Finding me in the desert? Everything that came after? Rowan was quiet for a long moment, considering. I regret Tom Hollis dying. I regret the people we lost defending Covenant. I regret that violence seems to follow me like a shadow. He turned to her, and his scarred face was gentle in the moonlight. But finding you, loving you, building this life, I'd do it all again, Clara. Every hard mile, every bullet, every impossible choice. Because they led here, to you, to Emma, to home. Me too, Clara said simply. The desert almost killed me, but it gave me you first. Fair trade. They sat in comfortable silence, two souls who'd found each other in the emptiness and refused to let go. The desert stretched beyond Covenant's edges, vast and merciless and unchanged. But they'd changed. They'd transformed from hunted to free, from broken to healing, from alone to together. Tomorrow would bring new challenges: raising a daughter, keeping peace, building a future in hostile territory. But they'd face it the way they'd faced everything else, side by side, choosing each other, choosing life. The stars wheeled overhead, ancient and indifferent, but Clara Cade looked at them and felt only gratitude for the journey that had broken her, for the man who'd helped her heal, for the life they'd built from nothing but will and love and stubborn refusal to accept the fates others tried to write for them. She'd been property once. Then she'd been free. Now she was simply, finally, completely herself. And that was the greatest victory of all.